What can a humble farmer, orphaned at the tender age of 2, possibly do to change the destiny of thousands of abandoned youth roaming the dangerous streets of 19th century industrial Italy? The answer lies in the extraordinary life of Saint John Bosco, the priest who revolutionized Catholic education with a method rooted in paternal love, reason, and religion. From the impoverished fields of Piedmont to the far corners of the world, this saintly educator built an empire of charity, rescuing countless young souls from the abyss of misery and sin. His story stands as a shining testament to how divine providence transforms human weakness into supernatural strength, and how a heart devoted to Mary, help of Christians, can move mountains for the salvation of the most vulnerable. Chapter 1. Childhood in the poverty of the Becci hamlet. In a modest little house in the Becci hamlet, a small village near Castelnuovo d'Asti, on August 16, 1815, a child was born, destined by Providence to become a father to multitudes. John Melchior Bosco came into the world within a peasant family marked by extreme poverty. Just 2 months after the final defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo, his father, Francis Bosco, was an honest farmer who worked on other people's land, and his mother, Margaret Occhiena, a woman of profound faith and heroic virtue. The small family lived in a shared room of Biglione House, where poverty was so severe that there was barely enough bread to go around each day. Tragedy struck the Bosco home early, when John was just 2 years old. Francis Bosco fell seriously ill after working in the freezing rain, and despite Margaret's care, he passed away, leaving her a widow with 3 young sons, Anthony, Joseph, and little John. The situation became desperate, as the land still needed tending, and the hungry mouths never stopped growing. Margaret, a woman of extraordinary strength, rejected proposals of remarriage that would have meant abandoning her sons, preferring to trust in divine providence and her own tireless labor. This heroic decision would profoundly shape the heart of young John, who learned the meaning of maternal sacrifice from the cradle. John's early years were spent between the fields and the stables, where he helped with chores according to his childish strength. The family lived practically on the charity of others and the exhausting work of Margaret, who sewed, washed other people's clothes, and worked the land from dawn till dusk. Anthony, the eldest son from Francis's first marriage, had a difficult temperament and frowned upon any attempt to educate his younger brothers, considering it a waste of resources. This family tension would become a heavy burden for John, who from childhood showed an insatiable desire to learn and a natural inclination towards the things of God. However, Anthony's opposition was firm. Peasants were born for the land, not for books. Despite the adverse circumstances, little John demonstrated extraordinary qualities that did not go unnoticed in the village. His prodigious memory allowed him to retain entire Sunday sermons, which he then repeated to other children gathered in the stable. Standing on a bench that served as an improvised pulpit, at just 8 years old, he was already organizing shows of acrobatics, sleight of hand, and games that attracted many boys from the surrounding area. But John had set an inflexible condition. Before starting the fun, everyone had to kneel to pray the Holy Rosary and listen to the repetition of the Sunday sermon. This combination of wholesome joy and religious formation would be, years later, the hallmark of his educational method. Divine Providence was preparing the future saint in the school of poverty, where he would learn the most valuable lessons for his future mission. In those difficult years, John knew hunger, cold, the humiliation of destitution, and the hardship of manual labor from childhood. He experienced firsthand what it meant to be a poor child, without resources or opportunities, dependent on the goodwill of others to survive. This visceral experience of childhood suffering would engrave in his heart an inextinguishable compassion for all abandoned and needy young people. Margaret, for her part, taught him by her example that true nobility consisted not in material riches, but in the richness of the soul, in trust in God, and in charity towards one's neighbor, thus sowing the seeds of holiness in that generous heart. Chapter 2. The Dream That Changed a Life. One night in 1824, when John was only 9 years old, the hand of God manifested itself in an extraordinary way in his life through a dream that would forever mark his destiny. In this prophetic dream, the boy saw himself in the midst of a multitude of boys who were blaspheming, fighting, and indulging in all kinds of disorders. Moved by a natural impulse, John threw himself among them, punching and hitting, trying to impose order by force. Suddenly, a man of majestic appearance appeared, dressed in radiant clothes, whose face shone with such intensity that John could not look at him directly. This august personage said to him in a sweet but firm voice, "Not with blows, but with gentleness and charity must you win over these friends of yours." Confused and frightened, John protested, saying that he was a poor and ignorant boy, incapable of instructing those wild boys in the truths of the faith. At that moment, the mysterious man revealed his identity and his mission. "I am the son of her whom your mother taught you to greet 3 times a day." Then he ordered him to look again at the young people. And John saw with astonishment that the violent boys had been transformed into ferocious animals, wolves, bears, tigers, and other wild animals that roared threateningly. Terror invaded the child's heart, but the Divine Master continued, "Here is your field of work. Make yourself humble, strong, and robust, and what you now see happening to these animals, you must do with my children." Instantly, a lady of majestic appearance appeared, dressed in a resplendent mantle that seemed covered with stars. Her beauty was indescribable, and her presence radiated a maternal sweetness that deeply consoled John. This lady took his hand tenderly and said, "Look." And at that moment, the ferocious animals were transformed into gentle lambs that jumped, bleated, and ran around as if wanting to celebrate that man and that lady. John, still immersed in the confusion of the dream, asked what all this meant. The lady responded, placing her hand gently on his head, "In due time, you will understand everything." No sooner had she spoken these words than the noise awakened young John. He was so deeply impressed that he recounted the dream to his entire family the very next day. The family's reaction to this extraordinary dream was varied and revealed their different characters. Margaret, with her simple and profound faith, commented with a hint of worry, "Perhaps you will become a priest." Anthony, the elder brother, scoffed, saying he'll be a captain of bandits. Joseph, the kind-hearted brother, suggested, "Maybe you'll be a shepherd of goats and sheep." The grandmother, ever the dreamer, exclaimed, "Dreams are just dreams. Pay them no mind." But John held those images and mysterious words in his heart, not yet understanding that heaven had revealed the work that divine providence had destined for him. That dream would be the first in a long series of prophetic dreams, marking his entire existence and becoming an extraordinary means of communication between God and his faithful servant. The dream worked a profound transformation in young John's soul. He began to seek, with even greater eagerness, ways to educate himself so that he might fulfill the mission he sensed within him. His heart burned with the desire to learn to read and write, to study the catechism, to prepare himself to be a useful instrument in God's hands. However, Anthony's opposition grew increasingly violent, even resorting to threats and physical abuse whenever he caught John with a book. The tension in the home became unbearable, until Margaret, with a heavy heart but with motherly wisdom, made the decision to send John to live temporarily with other families, where he could work and perhaps find some opportunity for instruction. Thus began a period of working and traveling for young Bosco, which, far from distracting him from his calling, strengthened it day by day. During these itinerant years, John worked as a shepherd, a farmhand, a blacksmith's assistant, a stable boy, and a tailor's apprentice, among other trades. Each work experience taught him practical skills that he would later employ in the education of his young charges. But above all, it kept him in direct contact with the working class and their spiritual needs. In every place he worked, John found time to gather other young people, teaching them prayers, telling them sacred stories, and organizing wholesome entertainment. Although ridicule and persecution were never far away, the inner fire kindled by that mysterious dream never went out. The seed planted by heaven on that memorable night was slowly germinating, preparing to bear abundant fruit in the Lord's vineyard, where thousands of young souls awaited the saving hand of this future father and teacher of youth. Chapter 3. Priestly Formation and First Steps. The possibility of pursuing formal studies seemed to open providentially when John, at the age of 15, met Father Joseph Colosso at the patron saint's festival in Buttigliera. This venerable old man, pastor of Murialdo, was impressed by the intelligence and piety of the young farm boy and generously offered to instruct him free of charge. For almost a year, John walked 6 miles each way between the Becci hamlet and Murialdo, studying Latin grammar, humanities, and rhetoric with extraordinary diligence under the guidance of the kind-hearted priest. It was a time of immense happiness, for he could finally quench his thirst for knowledge while deepening his understanding of sacred studies. However, the sudden death of Father Colosso in November of 1830 abruptly cut short this opportunity, plunging John into the deepest sorrow and leaving him once again without the means to continue his formation. Divine Providence, which never abandons those who trust in it, then arranged for John to be taken in at Castelnuovo by a generous tailor named Roberto. This pious man offered him shelter, food, and the opportunity to attend the local school while working in his tailoring shop. John applied himself to the study of the humanities with fervor, quickly distinguishing himself among his peers for his prodigious memory and his work ethic. Simultaneously, he learned the tailoring trade so perfectly that he would later confess, "If I hadn't become a priest, I would have been an excellent tailor." This manual skill, along with so many others he had acquired in his years of work, would serve him enormously in his future educational work. For he understood from his own experience the importance of providing poor young people with an honest trade that would allow them to earn a living with dignity. In 1835, at the age of 20, Saint John Bosco was finally able to enter the seminary in Chieri, thanks to the financial assistance of several benefactors who recognized his authentic vocation. Seminary life was a time of intense spiritual testing and purification for him. Extreme poverty forced him to wear a cassock mended countless times, to live in a freezing cell with no heating, and to endure frequent hunger that he concealed with admirable cheerfulness. His companions, some from wealthy families, did not always understand or appreciate this peasant seminarian with his rustic manners and marked regional accent. However, John compensated for these shortcomings with a burning spiritual fervor, an exemplary dedication to his studies, and a contagious joy that gradually won him general esteem. During his 6 years in the seminary, Saint John Bosco deepened his understanding of theology, philosophy, the Holy Scriptures, and ecclesiastical history with outstanding achievement. But more important than intellectual knowledge was the growth in virtue and in intimacy with God that he experienced in those formative years. He consecrated his virginity to God with a perpetual vow. He practiced bodily mortification without falling into excess. He cultivated a tender devotion to the most holy Virgin Mary, help of Christians, and he developed an apostolic zeal that was already manifested in his constant concern for the salvation of souls, especially young people. On Sundays, when he had permission to leave the seminary, John gathered groups of boys to teach them the catechism, organized wholesome games, and worked tirelessly to snatch them from the moral dangers lurking in the streets. The memorable day of priestly ordination arrived on June 5, 1841, in the chapel of the Archdiocese of Turin, when young Bosco was 25 years old. That bright morning, as he pronounced the sacred words of consecration during his first Mass in the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, Saint John Bosco experienced an indescribable joy that he himself would describe as a foretaste of paradise. Margaret Occhiena, his loving mother, was present at that sublime celebration, shedding tears of joy as she saw the fulfillment of the premonition she'd had when John Melchior Bosco told her about his first dream. After the ceremony, the newly ordained priest knelt before his mother to ask for her blessing, but she, with her characteristic wisdom, said words that he would never forget. "Now you have begun to celebrate Holy Mass. You have begun to touch Jesus Christ. It seems to me that from this moment on, you should begin to suffer the sorrows of this world. Always remember that beginning to say Mass is beginning to suffer." Margaret's prophetic words would be fulfilled in spades in the years to come. But in that moment of grace, Saint John Bosco only thought about how to better serve the souls that the Lord entrusted to him. After a brief period of rest in the Becchi hamlet, the young priest made the decision that would define his entire existence. Instead of accepting comfortable ecclesiastical positions or quiet rural parishes, he chose to pursue specialized studies in moral theology and pastoral care at the convent of St. Francis of Assisi in Turin, under the guidance of the wise Don Joseph Cafasso. This choice would lead him directly to the heart of the industrial city, where thousands of abandoned young people wandered the streets like sheep without a shepherd, unknowingly awaiting the arrival of that Father, whom God sent to save them from the abyss. Chapter 4. Turin and the Abandoned Youth. The Turin of 1841 was a city in full industrial transformation, attracting like a magnet thousands of impoverished farmers seeking work in the newly established factories. The chimneys spewed dense smoke over miserable neighborhoods where entire families were crammed together in subhuman conditions, and the streets teemed with boys left to their own devices, many of them orphans, or separated from their families by economic necessity. These young workers, some only 10 or 12 years old, were employed in grueling shifts in factories, workshops, and construction sites without any legal protection or moral or religious formation. On Sundays, their only days of rest, they roamed the streets, indulging in gambling, drinking, and all kinds of vices, frequently falling into the hands of unscrupulous adults who exploited or corrupted them. Saint John Bosco, under the wise spiritual direction of Don Joseph Cafasso, began to frequent the prisons of Turin as part of his pastoral training. The heartbreaking sight that he witnessed in those places of punishment profoundly marked his priestly heart. Most of the prisoners were young men, between 18 and 25 years old, many of them convicted of crimes committed in early adolescence. When talking with them, Saint John Bosco discovered similar stories, honest boys who had come from the countryside, who, upon finding themselves alone in the big city, without guidance or protection, had fallen into bad company and plunged into crime. The pain he felt before these shattered lives was intense, but even stronger was his conviction that everything would have been different if someone had lent them a helping hand at the opportune moment, if someone had offered them a safe place, religious instruction, and a sincere friend in whom to trust. The providential encounter that would mark the formal beginning of his apostolic work occurred on December 8, 1841, the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. Saint John Bosco was preparing to celebrate Holy Mass in the Church of St. Francis when the sacristan violently expelled a ragged boy who had entered to attend the ceremony. The young orphan, named Bartholomew Garelli, knew nothing of catechism and had never made his first communion. Saint John Bosco called him gently, spoke to him with paternal kindness, and asked him if he knew how to whistle. Upon the boy's affirmative answer, he proposed a deal. He would teach him to pray if Bartholomew brought him other friends for the next week. The deal was sealed with joy, and so the first oratory of Saint John Bosco was born, in the humble sacristy of that church, with a single illiterate boy, as the seed of what would be an immense work. The following weeks saw the group of boys who came on Sundays to the sacristy, where Saint John Bosco taught them catechism, led them to the sacrament of confession, and organized honest games, grow. From 1, they went to 5, from 5 to 20, from 20 to 100. The joy and love with which the young priest treated these abandoned boys irresistibly attracted more and more young people who found in him not only a teacher of religion, but a true father who was genuinely interested in their lives, their problems, their material and spiritual needs. Saint John Bosco knew each one by name, knew where they worked, worried about their employers, visited the sick, and sought employment for the unemployed. This affectionate closeness, combined with solid religious formation and joyful recreation, constituted from the beginning the educational method that would later be known as the Preventive System. The rapid expansion of the group soon created space problems that forced Saint John Bosco to tirelessly seek places where to gather his boys. For 5 years, the oratory was a wandering entity that changed its headquarters more than a dozen times. From the sacristy of St. Francis, they moved to a nearby meadow, then to a house in ruins, then to the cemetery of St. Peter, later to the Philippi Mills, and so on. Each eviction was a cause of sorrow, but also of renewed confidence in divine providence. The boys faithfully followed their spiritual father wherever he went, demonstrating with their fidelity that what they were looking for was not a place, but a person, someone who loved them and cared about them. The civil authorities and some ecclesiastics looked with suspicion on those meetings of poor young people, fearing public disorder or revolutionary propaganda. But Saint John Bosco persevered with heroic patience. Finally, in 1846, thanks to the kindness of Don Bosco, a priest who gave him part of his house, the oratory found a stable headquarters in the Valdocco neighborhood, a marginal area of Turin, where workshops and factories abounded. Here, in a humble house, with a shed that served as a chapel, and a meadow for recreation, the oratory of St. Francis de Sales was permanently established, a name chosen in honor of the saintly Bishop of Geneva, a model of sweetness and pastoral charity, Margaret Occhiena. St. John Bosco's elderly mother left the tranquility of the Becchi hamlet to come to Turin and help her son in caring for those needy boys. From that moment onward, Valdocco would become the heartbeat of a work that would spread to the ends of the earth, and those abandoned young people would finally find a home where love, joy, and holiness reigned. Chapter 5. The Oratory of St. Francis de Sales. The Valdocco Oratory quickly became a true home for hundreds of young men who found there what society denied them: a father's love, religious instruction, honest recreation, and opportunities for dignified work. St. John Bosco implemented a revolutionary educational system, which he himself would call the Preventive System, based on 3 inseparable pillars: reason, religion, and loving kindness. Reason consisted of making the boys understand the why of the rules and the importance of virtue, appealing to their intelligence before punishment. Religion permeated the entire life of the oratory, not as an external imposition, but as a source of joy and meaning in life. Loving kindness, expressed in the constant and affectionate presence of the educator among the young men. constituted the soul of the method, transforming obedience into a filial response and duty into cordial adherence. A typical day at Valdocco was intense and full of life. The boys began the day with Holy Mass, celebrated with devotion, but without rigidities that would scare away the weaker ones. Then came the classes in catechism, reading, writing, and arithmetic for the illiterate, taught by Saint John Bosco and some collaborating priests who gradually joined the work. On Sundays and holidays, the oratory was filled with joy, with games, songs, music, and theatrical performances that Saint John Bosco organized with youthful enthusiasm. The courtyard echoed with the voices of boys running, jumping, and competing under the watchful, but never oppressive, gaze of the holy priest, who often participated personally in the games, thus gaining the trust and affection of all. This combination of piety and joy, of formation and recreation, was something never seen before, and powerfully attracted the young workers of Turin. The central element of the preventive system was the continuous assistance of the educator among the young men, a concept that Saint John Bosco explained with these words: "The educator must be present among the boys as the father in the midst of his children." This loving presence prevented faults before they were committed, created a familial atmosphere where good was easy and attractive, and allowed him to know deeply the heart of each young man in order to guide him effectively toward virtue. Saint John Bosco categorically rejected the repressive system prevailing in his time, based on corporal punishment, public humiliations, and police surveillance. For him, punishment was the last resort, employed only when all other means had failed, and even then, it had to be applied with charity and for the purpose of amending, never of avenging or humiliating. Frequent confession and communion were fundamental pillars of the life of the oratory, but Saint John Bosco never imposed them violently. With infinite patience, he led the boys to a personal encounter with Jesus Christ in the sacraments, presenting them not as burdensome obligations, but as sources of joy and strength for life. He spent hours and hours in the confessional, listening with charity to the miseries of those young souls, encouraging them to get up after each fall, and igniting in them the desire for holiness. His spiritual direction was at the same time firm and gentle, demanding and understanding, adapted to the abilities of each one. Under this wise guidance, many of those boys who had arrived at the oratory ignorant of all religious truth became fervent Christians, and some even reached holiness, like Dominic Savio, whose angelic purity amazed Saint John Bosco himself. The professional dimension of education also occupied a prominent place in the Salesian project. Saint John Bosco understood that it was not enough to form good Christians if they did not have honest means to earn a living. Therefore, he established in Valdocco various workshops where young men learned useful trades: tailoring, shoemaking, carpentry, blacksmithing, printing, bookbinding, and others. The master craftsmen were carefully chosen, not only for their technical competence, but also for their exemplary moral lives, because Saint John Bosco knew that example is worth more than 1,000 words. The boys worked, studied, and prayed in a familial atmosphere where they felt loved and valued, where manual labor was not seen as punishment, but as a path of personal dignity and service to others. This integral model of education, spiritual, intellectual, moral, and professional, placed young people in conditions to become honest citizens and exemplary Christians, the supreme goal of all Salesian pedagogy. Life in the oratory was not without difficulties and trials. Extreme poverty was constant. Many times there was no bread for so many hungry mouths, and Saint John Bosco had to resort to begging or to loans that he did not know how he would pay. The cholera epidemics that periodically ravaged Turin found Saint John Bosco and his collaborators heroically attending to the sick, risking their own lives. Calumnies against the saint were not lacking. Some accused him of being crazy, others of being a revolutionary, others of being a swindler who enriched himself with the alms of benefactors. There were attempts to have Saint John Bosco committed to an asylum, and episodes of physical assault against his person. However, nothing stopped the apostle of youth, who responded to all adversities with unwavering faith in divine providence and total confidence in Mary, help of Christians, whom he considered the true founder and protector of the oratory. Chapter 6. Mary, help of Christians. Mother and teacher. From his earliest childhood, John Bosco had learned from his mother, Margaret Occhiena, a filial devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary that never cooled in his heart. The triple Marian greeting that he prayed every day, in the morning, at noon, and at night, became a perpetual practice that he maintained until his last breath. However, St. John Bosco's Marian devotion acquired a particular depth and centrality when he discovered in Mary, under the title of Help of Christians, the true mother and founder of all his work. It was not he who chose this invocation, but the Blessed Virgin Mary herself manifested herself as Help of Christians on numerous occasions, miraculously saving the oratory from mortal dangers, providing resources in times of extreme need, and protecting St. John Bosco from the enemies who tried to destroy his work. The title of Mary, Help of Christians, Auxiliary of Christians, has ancient roots in Catholic tradition, but it was Pope St. Pius V who especially promoted it after the victory at Lepanto in 1571, a victory attributed to the intercession of the Virgin Mary. St. John Bosco delved deeply into the study of this invocation and became convinced that Mary, under the title of Help of Christians, wanted to be the special protector of youth and the preeminent educator of young people. He tirelessly taught that Mary, Help of Christians, is the mother who promptly aids her children in all dangers of soul and body, especially in moments of temptation, when the devil attacks with greatest force. For young people, exposed to so many moral dangers in modern society, a confident recourse to Mary, Help of Christians, became a powerful weapon of eternal salvation. The propagation of this devotion became one of St. John Bosco's priority tasks. He spread it through preaching, writings, devotional images, and above all, the example of his unlimited trust in the Mother of God. He taught his boys 3 fundamental Marian practices that should accompany them throughout their lives: the daily recitation of the Holy Rosary, or at least a portion of it, special devotion to the solemnities of Mary, especially the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption, and the frequent ejaculatory invocation, Mary, Help of Christians, pray for us, in moments of danger or temptation, but more than external practices. St. John Bosco sought to instill an authentic and filial love toward the Most Holy Virgin, presenting her not as a distant figure, but as a most tender mother, always ready to help those who invoke her with faith. The most ambitious project in honor of Mary, Help of Christians, was the construction of a basilica dedicated to this invocation in the heart of Valdocco. In 1863, when he barely had the resources to maintain the oratory and existing works, St. John Bosco announced his intention to build a grand temple, a center of Marian devotion and a monument of gratitude to Mary, Help of Christians. Scoffing was immediate. How could a poor priest with no resources build a basilica? St. John Bosco responded simply, Mary, Help of Christians herself will provide the means. I am only the worker who executes her will. And indeed, through small alms from countless devotees, providential donations, and some truly miraculous events, the magnificent basilica rose, stone upon stone, until its solemn consecration on June 9, 1868. The devotion to Mary, help of Christians, produced abundant spiritual fruits in the oratory and throughout the Salesian work. Numerous young people attributed their conversion from a life of sin, their preservation from mortal dangers, or their perseverance in the grace of God, to the intercession of the Virgin. Saint John Bosco carefully collected these graces and published them for the edification of the faithful and to encourage trust in Mary's intercessory power. Among the most notable miracles attributed to Mary, help of Christians, were instantaneous healings of serious illnesses, sudden conversions of hardened sinners, and financial provisions arriving exactly when the need was most pressing. These visible signs strengthened everyone's faith and confirmed that Mary had truly become the mother and founder of the Salesian work. Marian spirituality permeated all aspects of life in the oratory and, later, in all Salesian houses. The great Marian feasts were celebrated with special solemnity, preceded by fervent novenas and accompanied by expressions of joy that included processions, songs, fireworks, and theatrical performances. Saint John Bosco instituted the custom of good night, a brief spiritual word he addressed to his boys each night before rest, where he frequently spoke of Mary, help of Christians, and encouraged Marian devotion. He insisted on the practice of saying 3 Hail Marys before sleeping, asking the Virgin for the grace of purity, and assured that whoever maintained this practice with faith would never die in mortal sin. Thus, the sweet figure of Mary, help of Christians, became a constant maternal presence that accompanied, protected, and sanctified every moment of the lives of those young people who had found in Valdocco not only an earthly father, but also a heavenly mother. Chapter 7, Foundation of the Salesian Congregation. As the oratory grew, Saint John Bosco understood he needed to found a religious congregation to perpetuate his work beyond his lifetime. On January 26, 1854, in Valdocco, he gathered 4 young collaborators, Michael Rua, Angel Savio, Joseph Rocchietti, and John Cagliero. With them, he shared his project to form a society dedicated to the Christian education of poor youth, especially through oratories and vocational schools. That night, they pronounced a private consecration to God, the seed of the future Salesian congregation. The first years were difficult. Ecclesiastical authorities mistrusted this new institute that did not follow traditional molds. No distinctive habit, no divine office in choir, allowing its members to leave freely for the apostolate. Saint John Bosco had to defend his project, demonstrating that religious life could adapt to the needs of the times without losing its essence of total consecration to God. Finally, the Holy See approved the Society of St. Francis de Sales on March 1, 1869, recognizing it as a congregation of pontifical right. In 1874, the first general chapter was held, where Saint John Bosco was confirmed as Rector Major and Michael Rua elected Vicar General. The Salesian charism was defined in the constitutions: to live and work for the salvation of young souls through the preventive system, founded on reason, religion, and loving kindness. Salesians committed to being educators, living among young people as loving parents, forming good Christians and honest citizens. The expansion was rapid. From Valdocco sprang foundations in Mirabello, Lanzo, Borgo San Martino, and many other Italian cities. Each house reproduced the spirit of the original oratory, adapting to local circumstances. The congregation attracted numerous vocations from young people who had known Saint John Bosco and desired to continue his work. The Salesians opened schools, workshops, printing presses, and any work that would serve for the integral education of youth. When St. John Bosco died in 1888, the congregation had 768 Salesians in 64 houses distributed throughout Europe and America. The prophetic dream he had at 9 years old, it was coming true. that small flock had multiplied into a multitude, one that would continue to grow exponentially in the decades to come, carrying the Salesian charism to the ends of the earth. Chapter 8. St. Mary Mazzarello and the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians. In Mornese, a small town in Piedmont, lived Mary Dominga Mazzarello, born on May 9, 1837, to a humble farming family. From childhood, she was known for her piety, her charity towards the poor, and her angelic purity. When the pastor, Father Pestorino, established the Daughters of Mary Immaculate Association, Mary was one of the first to join, consecrating her virginity to God. Saint John Bosco met Mary Mazzarello in 1864 during a visit to Mornese. He was impressed by her solid virtue and ability to guide souls. He saw in her and her companions the instrument to extend the Salesian method to poor girls and young women. A period of preparation began, where Saint John Bosco trained this group in the Salesian spirit. On August 5, 1872, the Institute of the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians was officially founded. When Mary Mazzarello and 10 companions made their first vows, Saint John Bosco presided over the ceremony, explaining their mission: to be for girls what the Salesians were for boys. Mary Mazzarello was elected Superior General, a position she held until her death in 1881. St. Mary Mazzarello established workshops where the girls learned domestic skills, sewing, and embroidery, while receiving moral and spiritual formation. The atmosphere was familiar and joyful, reproducing Valdocco with feminine delicacy. Her virtue manifested itself in profound humility, ardent charity, filial obedience to Saint John Bosco, and unlimited trust in Mary Help of Christians. She died on May 14, 1881, consumed by a tumor. Her last words were, "How beautiful are our holy rules, let us observe them well." Saint John Bosco declared, "Sister Mary Mazzarello was a saint." The Church beatified her in 1938 and canonized her in 1951. A shining example of holiness in ordinary life, lived with heroic love for God and neighbor. Chapter 9. Miracles and Extraordinary Gifts. Saint John Bosco's life was accompanied by supernatural phenomena. Prophetic dreams were his most characteristic gift. He experienced more than 160 supernatural dreams, where he received warnings about dangers, knowledge of the state of souls, and revelations about the Salesian work. The famous Dream of the Two Columns represented the Church finding salvation by anchoring itself in the Eucharist and Mary Help of Christians. The gift of reading hearts was exercised especially in the confessional. He revealed forgotten sins, hidden circumstances, and intimate thoughts to penitents. This gift served to lead souls to sincere confession. He used this gift with delicacy, never to humiliate, but to save. Miraculous healings were innumerable. He healed through prayer, laying on of hands, or holy water. Among the documented cases is the instant healing of young Charles with a mortal illness, and of a paralyzed woman, bedridden for years. St. John Bosco attributed these healings to Mary Help of Christians, not to his own merit. The multiplication of food occurred several times. The most famous case was when he distributed communion to hundreds of boys, with only a few consecrated hosts that multiplied miraculously. Another memorable episode was the multiplication of chestnuts in the refectory. These prodigies manifested how divine providence does not abandon those who trust in it. His prophetic ability encompassed historical events. He predicted the deaths of popes, European wars, religious persecutions, and the destiny of the congregation. He prophesied that missions would reach Patagonia when it seemed impossible. He had gifts of bilocation, appearing simultaneously in distant places. All these gifts were not sought, but granted freely by God to confirm His holiness and the good of souls. Chapter 10. Worldwide expansion of the Salesian work. The Salesian charism was destined to reach universal dimensions. The expansion began with oratories and schools in Italian cities, where Saint John Bosco's fame attracted requests from bishops and authorities. Each foundation reproduced the spirit of Valdocco, adapting to local circumstances. The missionary leap occurred in 1875, when Saint John Bosco sent the first expedition to Argentina. 11 Salesians departed, under the guidance of Father John Cagliero, responding to the request of the Archbishop of Buenos Aires and encouraged by Pius IX. The farewell was emotional. Saint John Bosco blessed his sons, entrusting them with the evangelization of those immense lands. The Argentine mission initiated an expansion that reached Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, and other countries. The Salesians established oratories in large cities for young immigrants. The most heroic work was to evangelize Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego. Father Cagliero, consecrated bishop and apostolic vicar, penetrated those frozen lands with missionaries. They learned native languages and lived with indigenous people, earning their trust through selfless love. The European expansion continued with foundations in France, Spain, England, Austria, where circumstances created masses of young people in need. The Daughters of Mary Help of Christians established schools and boarding schools. Complementing the work, Saint John Bosco, old and sick, made exhausting trips, raising funds and recruiting vocations. His fiery word moved hearts. His holiness attracted conversions. When he died in 1888, the congregation had 768 religious in 64 houses in Italy, France, Spain, England, Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, and Chile. The Daughters of Mary Help of Christians numbered 393 religious in 50 houses. On the centenary of his death, 1988, the Salesians exceeded 17,000 members in 114 countries, serving millions of young people. The tree planted in Valdocco had grown into an immense forest, fulfilling the prophecy of the dream of his 9 years. Chapter 11. Final Years and Holy Death. His final years were a Calvary of physical suffering, endured with heroic patience. From 1870, he suffered from deforming rheumatism, leg ulcers, extreme weakness, and recurrent fevers. Doctors ordered rest, but Saint John Bosco continued confessing, attending to correspondence, receiving visitors, and supervising the Salesian works. In 1883, he suffered a collapse that brought him to the brink of death. Doctors declared that he would not pass that night, but Mary Help of Christians worked a miracle, prolonging his life. He recovered partially, although his health never returned. The following 5 years were of a very heavy cross, blind in one eye, almost deaf, with swollen legs. He dragged his aching body to continue serving. He offered up his sufferings for the conversion of sinners and the sanctification of Salesians. During this period, he completed biographies of Dominic Savio and Michael Magone, young saints from the oratory. He wrote the history of the oratory and circular letters, exhorting fidelity to the charism. Within these pages, written with a trembling hand but a burning heart, his soul pulsed, love for Jesus Christ, devotion to Mary Help of Christians, zeal for the youth, and unwavering trust in divine providence. In 1887, his condition worsened noticeably. The doctors declared death was imminent. He serenely accepted, arranging temporal and spiritual matters. He summoned superiors for last recommendations, maintained the spirit of family, never abandoned predilection for poor youth, preserve devotion to Mary Help of Christians, live real poverty, be faithful to the Church and to the Pope. These testamentary words remained engraved in the hearts of those who heard them. The last month was a prolonged agony. He lay in his humble room, surrounded by his spiritual children. On January 30th, he received the last sacraments, With fervent devotion, he agonized consciously, repeating ejaculatory prayers to Jesus and Mary at dawn on January 31st, 1888. As the bells rang the Angelus, he breathed his last sigh. His face remained serene and smiling. A multitude flocked to the oratory to venerate his remains. The burial was a historic event. With all of Turin pouring into the streets, he was provisionally buried in the municipal cemetery, later transferred in 1929 to the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians, where he now rests. The church beatified him in 1929 and canonized him in 1934. Chapter 12. Prayer to Saint John Bosco. O glorious Saint John Bosco, loving father of youth and model of Christian educators who consumed your life in the service of poor and abandoned young people. Intercede before the Holy Trinity for my spiritual and temporal needs. You who knew extreme poverty, help me to trust in divine providence. Obtain for me the grace to work with diligence without being discouraged, imitating your industriousness and heroic patience. You who educated thousands with the preventive method, teach me to be an instrument in the Christian formation of youth. Grant me the wisdom to understand that true education wins hearts through sincere love that seeks the eternal good. Holy Father, who loved Mary, Help of Christians, increase in my heart the devotion to our Heavenly Mother. May I turn to her in temptations and dangers, trusting in her intercession. May I learn to pray the rosary with faith and consecrate myself to her Immaculate Heart. Intercede before Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament, so that I may participate frequently in confession and communion. Deliver me from mortal sin and grant me the grace to rise quickly through penance. Infuse in me a hunger for the Eucharist, the source and summit of Christian life. Friend of the pontiffs and defender of the Church, obtain for me filial love towards the Pope and adherence to the magisterium. Deliver me from modern heresies and a spirit of destructive criticism. I beg you for the young people of our time who face immense dangers: pornography, drugs, materialism, moral relativism. Protect them and raise up numerous Salesian educators who will continue your work. Intercede for Salesians and daughters of Mary, Help of Christians throughout the world, so that they may remain faithful to the charism. May they never abandon predilection for poor youth, preserve the spirit of family, live evangelical poverty, and work for the salvation of souls. I entrust to you this particular intention. Mention specific grace. If it is fitting for my sanctification and the glory of God, obtain it for me through your intercession. Saint John Bosco, father of orphans, teacher of the ignorant, friend of sinners, terror of demons, and glory of the Church, pray for us, that through your intercession and the merits of Jesus Christ, we may obtain the graces to persevere until death and enjoy God eternally in heaven. Amen.